Well, welcome everyone to Apologetics on Mission's monthly AOM talk. Joining us this month is Dr. Raphael Samuel, who has been a lecturer for us for several years now. In fact, he taught a class on the historicity of the resurrection just a few weeks ago, and he's been one of our regular teachers on truth, both of those in our survey course. So we're really pleased to have him. He is both an apologist and a member of Apologetics Canada's board of directors, but he's also a medical doctor. So he brings not only his Christian faith, but he brings his medical expertise to this very important subject. So before I ask Ben to maybe say a few words and then we hand it off to Raphael, let me open us in prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. We're here ultimately for your glory, and we have so much to be thankful for. But we're gathered specifically at this time to discuss a difficult topic. It's not difficult in terms of your guidance. Your guidance is very, very clear, but the challenges in our world and our cultures, and both at the cultural level and at the individual level, are big. And our hope and our prayer today is that we'll be able to walk away better prepared to speak to this topic with both wisdom and sensitivity. So, Holy Spirit, I ask that you give Raphael that wisdom to speak to us and give us ears to hear. And all this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So, Ben, do you
Man,
want to say a few words?
I do. So my first thought is how encouraging it is to have all of you join us and see both new faces and familiar friends. And I was just right before this Zoom, I was on another Zoom. I had to get up really early to join a family in Pakistan. And it was just so marvelous to gather together with just a handful of them and realize the truth of I think it's Matthew 18 where it says where two or more of you are gathered together, I am with you. And so I just feel that all the time, even on this electronic means, talking into a screen. I know that the Lord is with us in spirit, and so I'm so encouraged. Number two is I really, part of what we love to do as a ministry is introduce the people that God has connected us to other people that they need to know about. And Raphael is one of those people. You need to know about his ministry, Apologetics Canada. So I know there's people involved with Apologetics Kenya, Apologetics Uganda, Apologetics South Africa. Well, there's also Apologetics Canada. And that ministry is really doing great. I'm very excited. I get to go up in a couple weeks to one of their annual conferences and experience some great teaching on technology, AI, and how it's impacting the church and how we can use it, what we need to watch out for. And particularly of note, the Lord has just provided an amazing voice through their ministry. And he's a young man, Wes Huff. And so if you don't know Wes Huff yet, he's part of the team that Raphael is involved in. And he's been given some very big platforms to preach the gospel. And I would commend to you one in particular that I think represents the character of apologetics that we want to advocate and teach towards. So the podcast is Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is the number one YouTube podcaster in the world, and he invited Wes Huff on his show recently, and just did an amazing job. I will say that Joe is a bit rough in his language, so don't be surprised if you hear some rough language, but nonetheless, I think it's a great example for us to look towards to see how a young man like Wes can really preach the gospel in a winsome, gentle, respectful way, and have his voice magnified through the platform of Joe Rogan. So when we're done with this, you need to go search Joe Rogan, Wes Huff, and put it on your list of things to watch. So uh, grateful to have Raphael join us and represent that ministry and bring his wisdom into this great and important topic.
All right. With that, Raphael, we'll turn it over to you, and you're
Great.
welcome to
So
share
I have a
slides at any point.
PowerPoint, and then I'll be sharing it.
While Raphael's doing that, maybe I should have actually introduced myself and Ben, because I think we have a few folks here that have not joined us in the past. So this whole presentation is sponsored by our ministry. I am the academic and military outreach director for Apologetics on Mission, and Ben is my partner, but also the president and founder of the ministry.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes, we can. Looks good.
Okay, so it's so good to be with you guys. Please excuse me, I do have a cough from a recent viral infection. So it may be disguising my accent, which is South African. And I just like to warn you guys that it was voted the 16th most attractive language accent in the world. It came in just above Braille. So um, I can identify quite a bit with quite a few of you people because I'm actually Asian by ethnicity and African by birth. And since moving to North America 8 years ago, I consider myself an Indian African American. But like most of you, I'm a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. The title of my talk today is on abortion and that we need to talk. So just a brief word that I am from Apologetics Canada. I'm an apologist there and speaker and also a member of the board of directors. And it's really, I appreciate the partnership we have with Apologetics on a Mission. As mentioned before, I've given several lectures, and I really appreciate the work done by Apologetics on a Mission. But coming back to the title of my talk, that on abortion, that we need to talk, and we really do need to talk. Whether you are pro-abortion or anti-abortion, or you just don't know, or you don't care, or even if you don't care to know. My goal here this morning or this evening, wherever you are at in the world, is not to convert you or to convince you to my line of thinking. I have a much more modest goal than that. I want to make you think about this issue. I want to make you think deeply about this issue for yourself, to make up your own mind. So I will be presenting and making some truth claims about this issue. And all I ask is that you carefully consider the claims that I make and the evidence that I present, bearing in mind that the claims that I make can either be true or false, and what they can never be is relatively true. Um, you've got to decide for yourself what is the truth and what should I believe on this topic. And the aim of belief is actually to correspond to the truth. Because if you end up believing something that's false, you end up believing a lie and living an illusion. Truth is not something we create or choose, but it's something we discover. It is something extrinsic to us. You see, there is the truth, and it's real, objective. It's singular, it's independent of people, of the person you are, of the period of history you're living in, or the particular environment or culture that you're living in. You see, it's not my truth or your truth, it is the truth. It's not a matter of likes or dislikes or choice or preference or even your morals or mine. It's about the truth. So I want us during this talk to consider truth. And as Christians, we are called to be fundamentally pro-truth and pro-Jesus. So we really need to talk. Why do we need to talk? Because this issue of abortion is just too widespread, too prevalent and pervasive an issue, too global an issue not to talk about. And the World Health Organization estimates that approximately every year, about 73 million induced abortions take place worldwide. Now, I'll just let that figure sink in just for a second. This is according to the World Health Organization, which is a very secular, very pro-abortion organization. And they state that there are 73 million induced abortions that take place every year. Now, for most of us, this is an unimaginable number. We can't even fathom just how really big the number it is. So I just want to give you a little bit of a perspective about this. 9/11, which was a really momentous time in our history, and there were approximately 2,900, I believe, people that were killed during this time. So you can just sort of imagine that in the Holocaust, over a period of several years, 6 million Jews were killed. If you take all the deaths in World War II, the number of civilian deaths totaled about 50 to 55 million, and the military death from all causes about 21 to 25 million. That is roughly the amount of abortions that occur every year. The entire population of the United Kingdom is 69 million. That's like wiping out the entire population of the United Kingdom in a year. So we need to talk about this because this is a prevalent and a common issue. We need to talk about it also because people need healing. The World Health Organization estimates that approximately 10
Yeah.
end up in an induced abortion. So it's very likely that if you're on this Zoom meeting, it's likely that either you or a loved one have or will be affected by this. And if you have, I just want to reiterate that there is forgiveness, there is healing, there is grace, there is future, and there is a hope. And it is all found at the foot of the cross of Calvary. Isaiah 53 says that he was crushed for our transgressions, and by his stripes we have been healed. And therefore, we need to talk because people need that healing and restoration. But we need to talk in compassion. We need to talk with gentleness and respect. 1 Peter 3:15, with grace and truth, John 1:17, and always speaking the truth in love, Ephesians 4:15. So we need to clarify the issue right at the moment. The Britannica Encyclopedia defines an abortion as a medical procedure that is used to end a pregnancy and cause the death of a fetus. So ultimately, the goal of this medical procedure is to end the pregnancy and cause the death of the fetus. So I just want to distinguish here between an induced abortion and a spontaneous abortion. Many people tend to get confused about this, but a spontaneous abortion is a medical term that we use for miscarriage. But an induced abortion refers to an active intervention that is used to end the pregnancy and cause the death of the fetus. So when we consider this definition, this really gets us to the heart of the issue. Because really, it's not about going down the rabbit trails of choice, of reproductive freedom, about imposing your morality on somebody else. It's really an issue of one question and one question only. And that question is, what is it? What is the fetus? The abortion causes the death of the fetus. We should be primarily asking ourselves, what is it? And that is the only question that needs to be answered. In our discussions with people, we need to bring that question to the fore. This is the fundamental question, the heart of debate that we have to keep coming back about to avoid going down particularly rabbit trails. We need to simplify and clarify the debate. And this is the most fundamental question. And there's an analogy that's used by pro-life advocates. Say I'm in the kitchen and I'm washing dishes, and my 7-year-old son comes to me and he asks the question, can I destroy this? What is the most important question that I need to ask? And it's simply, what are you about to destroy? If it's a spider, go ahead and destroy it. But what about if it's a precious heirloom from grandma? Or worse still, what happens if he has his hands around the neck of his little brother? So before we kill or destroy any living thing, we need to pause and ask ourselves, what is it that I'm about to kill? Now, this is a scientific question. It's not a philosophical question, and it's not even a theological question. Note that I have not even quoted any Bible verses about this. This is strictly a scientific question and should primarily be answered by scientists who specialize in this area, people called embryologists. But I don't think we need a degree in science or to consult a science textbook to answer this question. It is a common sense question. What is it? Let's tease this out just a little bit. You may say, oh no, it's just a blob of tissue. Well, medically and scientifically, we are all just blobs of tissue. Can we not be more specific? Well, we know that this blob of tissue is growing, it's developing, it's actually directing its own growth and development. So we come to the conclusion that it is living because only living things are capable of growing, of developing, of directing their own growth and development. So then if we want to place CSI, and say, is this part of the mother's body like a tooth or an appendix that we can just extract a tooth and discard it or have an appendectomy? Um, but, or is this a separate body within the mother's body? In fact, if we find some tissue of this fetus from an abortion and we do some DNA analysis on it, we find that the DNA of this individual is different from the mother's DNA. In fact, its blood type is even different from the mother's DNA. In fact, the placenta which connects the fetus to the uterus of the mother, is such a highly specialized organ that medically we should all just fall down on our knees and worship the creator God who designed it. That even the blood of the mother and the child do not ordinarily mix, and are kept completely separate because of the function of this placenta. So we can see that this blob of tissue is living and distinct. And it's also, we need to ask ourselves, is it complete or is it partial? Is it missing part of its nature? And clearly it's not. It is whole. And then if we do some further analysis, some DNA analysis, what species does it belong to? Does it belong to a rat? Does it belong to a puppy? And we do scientific analysis on this, we all will come to agree that it's human. Even pro-abortionists like Dr. Willie Parker made the profound statement, we know that women do not give birth to puppies. Women give birth to human babies. Humans give birth to humans. So without a degree in science or even consulting a scientific textbook, we can understand that the fetus is a living, distinct, and whole human being. You see, you were all embryos, just like you and I were once toddlers, we were once fetuses, some of us were once teenagers, and some of us will be senior citizens. Your form and appearance may have changed, your level of functioning may have changed, but your intrinsic human nature has always remained constant. We have to get the science right. And if we get the basic scientific facts wrong, further discussion and debate would be invalid and baseless. So let's see what the scientist actually says. This is a statement put out by the American College of Pediatricians in 2017 about when life begins. And they note the predominance of human biological research confirms that human life begins at conception, fertilization. Very important point. Human life begins at conception or fertilization. At fertilization, the human being emerges as a whole, genetically distinct, individuated, zygotic, living human organism, a member of the species Homo sapiens, needing only a proper environment in order to grow and develop. The difference between the individual in its adult stage and its zygotic stage is one of form and not nature. Now, this is very important statement because it brings some very important points. Human life begins at conception. Again, it is reinforced that the embryo, that the fetus is living, it's distinct, it is whole, and it's human. And another fundamental point is the difference is in form, in stage of development, in age, but not in intrinsic human nature. I repeat, there's no significant difference in your human nature, in your humanity, in your individuality, in your value when you are an embryo or fetus and you as you exist now. So, what do the experts, people who study human embryology, actually note about this? And every embryology textbook, every embryologist is unanimous in their understanding of the issue. As C.W. Kisher, an embryologist prominent and during his presentation to the American Bioethics Advisory Commission stated, every embryologist worldwide states that the life of the individual human being begins at at fertilization. And I've just included some of embryology textbooks that you can check out on Google Books or Amazon. And two of these textbooks I actually used in medical school. We used Langman and we used Keith Moore on embryology, and all of them say unequivocally that a human being begins to exist at the beginning of conception. Now, this is the scientific consensus amongst international human embryologists and are presented in the most authoritative and respected and widely used scientific textbooks. But you don't need to read an embryology textbook or to be a scientist to know this. We all know this, but we as individuals choose to suppress it depending on whether the child is wanted or unwanted. And this is hypocrisy. How many of you have experienced a situation like this? You may have touched your wife's pregnant belly and felt the baby move, or seen a child touch their mother's pregnant baby, or talk to their brother or sister in the womb. We know this intrinsically, and we don't need a scientific textbook to tell us. So we know that the fetus is living, distinct, whole, and human in its intrinsic nature. And this is our strategy. We have to bring people back to this one question. So where does this leave us morally? Does the pro-life position have a moral stance on the issue? And in logic, the highest form of reasoning is called deductive reasoning, or from a deductive argument. And there we have premises, and we put forward premises. And if the premises are true and correctly related to the conclusion, then the conclusion has to be true. So what is our premise? Our premise one is that it is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. So now notice the phrasing that pro-lifers use here. It is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. So we're not saying that this is a criminal human being, this is a convicted human being. So it leaves out the quagmire that is regarding the death penalty. And it is wrong to intentionally kill. So it leaves out collateral damage that that occurs naturally in war, whether the war is just or whether the war is unjust. Premise 2 states that abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Now, we have established this fact scientifically. There is no theological or philosophical argument regarding this. This is a scientific fact. And therefore, our conclusion follows logically. Therefore, abortion is wrong. This is the moral position of the pro-life camp. This is a deductive argument. We're using both science and logic. And this is a strategy that we need to adopt when we address objections to the pro-life position. We have to bring them back to this deductive argument. Note there's no biblical verses that are mentioned here. This is purely based on science and logic. And our number one strategy is to ask that one question, what is it? And then lead them to this deductive argument. And from that, whatever question they may propose, you transform that question or say, can I ask you a question? And the question is, When is it right to take the life of an innocent human being? That is the fundamental question. This is the heart of the issue, and I cannot emphasize it enough. When is it right to take the life of an innocent human being? Now, you may say that the fetus in the womb looks different. It looks different from an adolescent and a child. It just doesn't look like a child. It behaves differently. But we have to understand that there are different stages or forms in the life of a human being. And a fetus does not look like a teenager. An infant does not look like or function like a senior citizen. And every single human that ever existed, including you and me, looked like an embryo and a fetus at that particular age and level of development. So we need to argue a little bit of philosophy here, showing that there's no essential difference between the embryo or the fetus that we once were and the adult that we now are today that would justify killing us at the early stage of development. Humans have value simply because they're human, not because of some acquired property that they gain or lose during their lifetimes. And if you deny this, it is difficult to account for fundamental human rights. Yes, there are differences, but let's look at the differences and see if they are significant. And Stephen Schwartz does this with this mnemonic called SLED, and I suggest that you use this mnemonic. So number one is size. Yes, you are smaller as an embryo or fetus, but since when does your body size determine value? When did larger humans become more valuable than smaller ones? When did grown adults, compared to a 2-year-old, have more inherent value? In fact, it is the weaker, the smaller ones that deserve our higher level of protection. What about level of development? True, you were less developed as an embryo, and fetus are less developed than teenagers. But do teenagers have a greater right to life than a 2-year-old? Uh, and just to provide you with some medical facts, something you can really boast to your teenager is that the brain is only fully developed at the age of 25. So only once you're 25 years old do you have a fully developed and mature brain. So level of development does not justify us in killing children or teenagers. What about the environment? Where you are has no bearing on what you are, on your intrinsic nature. And how does the journey of 8 inches down the birth canal suddenly change the essential nature of the unborn? Now, I've administered anesthesia to hundreds, if not thousands, of cesarean sections during the last 20 plus years that I've been an anesthesiologist. And there's just a few centimeters of skin, fat, and muscle between the outer world and the baby in the womb. And I've seen that few centimeters of skin and fat and muscle being cut through during a cesarean section and a baby emerging. And I'm flabbergasted. I'm just astounded. I'm dumbfounded how that people can say that process can change the intrinsic nature and humanity of a child within just a few seconds. Literally, to get the baby out during a cesarean section takes about 30 seconds. What about the degree of dependency? Sure, you are dependent on your mother for survival, but so are newborns, so are toddlers. When does dependence on another human being mean that we can kill you? I mean, I'm a anesthesiologist. I'm a peddler of unconsciousness. So when I put my patient to sleep, they are completely dependent on me and on the ventilator and on my management. does that mean that I can just go and kill them or the surgeon can kill them? What about people with significant learning disabilities that are completely dependent? What about those in ICU that are dependent on the ventilator, on the ICU nurse? Um, So this is just the picture that of a surgical procedure that we often do. It's called the exit procedure, and science is so advanced that we can operate surgically on the fetus in the womb. So while the fetus is still in the womb, we can correct certain abnormalities like spina bifida. So what happens is they make an incision in the uterus, perform surgery uh, on the fetus, then close up the uterus, and then continue with the pregnancy. And this was a picture that was taken of this baby called Samuel, and he was 21 weeks at this time. And you can see him reach out from his mother's womb and actually grasp the surgeon's hands. So, how do we answer questions? And this is an apologetics organization. So, we want to know, how do we give a defense? How do we make an apologia, an apologia about this pro-life position that we are talking about? And the fundamental thing is to ask questions. And I would just love to refer you to Greg Kokel at this point on his book Tactics, and he's got another later book called Street Smarts that really talk about how to engage people by asking questions. And it's important, really, when you address objections to ask a question, because you're not really sure whether this question is a heart issue or whether this question is a head issue. And first, we want to demonstrate compassion and love, and we want to be sensitive. And we want to use this opportunity to show care and to answer the person and not just the question. Because if you consider the statistics, um, there's a good chance that the person who's raising the objection may have even been personally affected by abortion in some way. So we really need to be sensitive. And our strategy is the same. We need to ask the question, what is the unborn? We need to expose this elephant in the room, um, which in this situation is actually the fetus. We need to expose the issue regarding the humanity of the unborn. And we, in pro-life apologetics, use a technique called trotting out the toddler, which I will get to at a later stage. And remember our deductive argument. We need to come back to the deductive argument. Now, I highly recommend any podcast or any written material of Scott Klusendorf. I've learned tremendous amount from him. He is a pro-life apologist and has also got his master's in apologetics from Biola University, which is the alma mater of both Doug and Ben. And that's the university I'm currently completing my master's in apologetics. And he suggests that there are 5 top reasons that people, or 5 top ways in which people raise objections against the pro-life position. The first way they do is that they relativize the issue. So if you're not sure what relativism is the belief that truth and morality is relative. It's relative to an individual, to the person, to the particular period of history, or to a particular culture, environment, or society. So basically they say, no, that's true for you, but it's not true for me. That may be your morals, but not mine. That's your truth. And essentially, right at the bottom of this is the cult of the choice. Choice has become the thing that is worshipped. There's a right to choose. And this is something that is raised very often when it comes to the abortion issue. The opposing camp call themselves pro-choice. But you see, the problem with that sentence is actually incomplete. What is the choice? The choice is to have an abortion. And what is an abortion? We've known this from our definition of abortion. It is to end the pregnancy and to kill the fetus. And so, whenever somebody relativizes the issue, whenever they bring up issues of choice or privacy or poverty, advancing the education or career or convenience of the mother, pro-lifers adopt the strategy of trotting out the toddler. So what we say is, suppose that I have a 2-year-old here. I have a 2-year-old in front of me, and does those reasons validate the killing of this 2-year-old? Because remember, we have established the humanity of the fetus. So, for example, if somebody says women have a right to privacy, and the choice of an abortion is a private decision made between a woman and her physician. Well, pretend I have a 2-year-old here in front of you, and I take my 2-year-old to the doctor. May I suggest to the doctor that the doctor kill this 2-year-old, just as long as I do it in the privacy of the doctor-patient relationship? Or what about poverty? Many poor people can't afford to raise a child. So I raise the point and I trot out my toddler. When human beings get expensive, can we kill them? Suppose a large family collectively decide that they want to dispose of their youngest 3 children in order to ease the family budget. Would that be okay? Mother Teresa says it is a poverty to decide that a child must die so that you may live as you wish. What about the question? Well, no one knows when life begins, therefore, abortion should be remain legal. Um, so first of all, that's an incorrect statement scientifically. But if we if we're driving on a road and we come across a coat lying in the middle of the road and it looks like it's moving, do we stop and pause the car? Do we get out of the car and see whether there's a living human being there? Or do we just drive faster? It doesn't mean that there's no consensus or scientific consensus just because you don't know. And consider the popular pro-life slogan: don't like an abortion, don't have one. Don't like an abortion, don't have one. And notice what's happening here. They are switching an objective truth claim that we're making. The truth claim we're making is that killing an innocent human being, a defenseless human being, is objectively wrong. But then they are suggesting that it become a personal preference or a choice. Notice the absurdity of this. It's like saying, don't like rape, don't be a rapist. Don't like child abuse, don't abuse a child. Don't like slavery, don't own one. Then the second way that people raise these objections is they go on the attack. And this is called ad hominem fallacy. So you're a man, you don't have a uterus. you shouldn't actually talk about this issue, or you've never bore children, or you want to impose your morals on me. So we need to be aware of this, and we need to change the focus of the charge. So an easy way to do this is, let's pretend that I am who you claim I am. I am sexist, or I am a man, or let me just throw in other ones. I smell, or I'm ugly. How does it change the fact that abortion kills an innocent human being? How does it change that truth claim? And then they hide behind the hard cases. They hide behind cases like rape or incest. And medical abortion where the life of the mother is really at risk. Now, first of all, these are extremely rare. Less than 1% of all abortions occur because of uh, because of rape. And again, the situation, you trot out the toddler. Um, what what should we do if I bring a 2-year-old here in front of you, and she reminds me of a painful event? And yes, this event was rape. She is the product of a rape. Should I kill this 2-year-old? And just on a quick note on the question of abortion or ending pregnancy due to the life of the mother being threatened. Now, I have performed anesthesia for numerous surgeries uh, where there's been an ectopic pregnancy. And an ectopic pregnancy is the fetus or the embryo is growing outside the uterus, and the life of the mother here is in extreme danger. And the choice here is to save one or to allow both to die. So that's a salvage procedure. You do not intentionally want to kill the child, but you are trying to save at least one, whereas two would actually die. So don't confuse this issue with medical abortion versus um, abortion for other reasons. And this is extremely rare, where situations like in a state called pre-eclampsia or eclampsia. And coming from South Africa and having trained in South Africa, we have had to do surgeries to deliver the fetus in order to save the mother um, from dying from eclampsia. Now, this is extremely rare. It rarely ever happens in the first world countries, and largely in third world countries, because these mothers don't have access to appropriate care. So we must not confuse this issue. The fourth reason is bodily autonomy, where the woman has a right, we are told, to her own body. Now, first of all, you can see that there's an issue here, because uh, the next question I would ask is, how many fingers does a pregnant mother have? How many hearts do a pregnant mother have? How many toes does she have? She can't have two brains. So clearly, there's more than just one body involved here. There's two bodies, there's one body within another body. And we all know from law and from legal requirements that we are not allowed to just do what we want with our own body. We can't just go and assault someone, smash someone with a bat, because we have the right to do what we want with our own body using our own hands, or even traffic laws that prevent us from just walking across the highway. We're not just allowed to do what we want with our own body. But this situation is different. The real question is, does the mother have a duty to her children? And again, we trot out the toddler. If I, as a mother, want to go to Hawaii for a holiday, do I have the right to leave my 1-year-old alone at home for a week without care? Will the law allow that? Or do I have to do something about that? So you see, trotting out the toddler is really an important technique. And lastly, is perhaps the most scary and most serious challenge, but very few people use it. And it is only used by philosophers and ethicists because they acknowledge the humanity of the unborn. You see, in academia, in the academic situations, there's no debate about whether the fetus is human or not. Even people that are pro-abortion agree that the fetus is human. But what they go on to say is that the fetus may be human, but the fetus is not a person. Now, that may sound ridiculous to you, and they keep really changing the goalpost. First, they said no, the fetus is not distinct, it's not human, the fetus is not viable. But those have all been refuted. So this is the one thing that they left with. The fetus is human, but not a person. And this brings us to this concept of personhood theory, which is the greatest threat to human rights in existence. When we cross this barrier that the ancients set about killing our own babies, we crossed a threshold. And this is spilling over into ethics and philosophy. So they define a person as a person who has a particular set of abilities or functions. And there are various philosophers like Mary Wallen, Michael Tooley, Joseph Fletcher, and they all talk either about consciousness or self-awareness or the desire to have a life or higher cognitive functioning. But let's look back from our lessons in history. Now, I grew up under apartheid, and the vast majority of the population were not considered persons because of their race. When we look at the Rwandan genocide, there was a process of dehumanization here, where one group was referred to as cockroaches in order to dehumanize them. The same can be said about the Yazidis in Iraq and in Syria, or the Muslims that were in Bosnia, or the Jews during the Holocaust, where religion was used. And it may even surprise you that until 1929, in the country that I currently live in, women were not considered persons by the Supreme Court. So, number one, this is so arbitrary. Persons, not humans, have moral value and require legal protection. We speak about person rights and not human rights. This leads us to an interesting scenario where you get a non-person human, like unborn humans, like a newborn child. And you get this even more bizarre concept of non-human persons, like sheep or like pigs. So notice this criteria excludes unborn humans, healthy infants, people with dementia, neurocognitive disorders, and disabilities. What about these humans and infants that are dependent? What about the cognitively impaired? What about people under anesthesia? What about people in a coma, in ICU, that are sedated, that are critically ill, that are not conscious, that don't have desires, that are not self-aware? Listen to what Peter Singer says, who is now retired, but he was the philosopher and head of department of Princeton University, and published this textbook on practical ethics that was used in ethics. He says human babies are not self-aware. Now he's talking about born babies, toddlers. He's not talking about babies in the womb. Human babies are not born self-aware or capable of grasping that they exist over time. They are not persons. The life of a newborn is of less value than the life of a pig, a dog, or a chimpanzee. We really have been educated into imbecility, as Malcolm Muggeridge says it. Now, if you think that's so strange, just consider this American bald eagle, the offspring of an American bald eagle. If you had to steal the eggs of American bald eagle, you would be subject to a fine of 250,000 US dollars, or up to 2 years in prison. In Canada, we're not allowed to kill this disgusting creature that God created called a bat that spreads rabies. It grosses me out. You'd be charged 10,000 Canadian dollars if you kill a bat. But what's the charge or the penalty for killing an unborn human being? Maybe that's a question you should ask your vegetarian or vegan friend. Why are they vegetarian? Why are they vegan? Do they believe in abortion rights? Do they believe in the freedom of a woman to choose? I mean, they won't even eat an animal. Some of them won't even eat eggs, but yet they are pro-abortion. So you can see it's absurd. Personal theory, it's arbitrary. Who gets to say what criteria, whether it's race, whether it's gender, whether it's religion, whether it's some form of level of functioning? Conception remains the only biological unique moment in time to anchor personhood. A person is a human, no matter the size, location, degree of dependency, or cognitive function. And you've got to ask yourself, if we reject human rights and adopt personhood theory, what is the basis of human rights? What is the foundation of our human rights? You see, a person is a human. Have you ever met a non-human person or a non-person human? This concept is ridiculous. Now we are we are sliding down the slippery slopes here that abortion has caused. What about women's rights? Now, some of you may not have known about the tragedy of sex selective abortion. Now, this is really such an incredible tragedy. There was a study published in the medical journal, The Lancet, and they won't call it female deaths. In the article, they call it missing births. So they looked at data from 1987 to 2016, 3 decades of abortion. And they found out that there were 13.5 missing female births. Why? Because in places like India and China and other parts of the world, mothers prefer to have sons, or fathers prefer to have sons rather than female children. So as soon as they have an ultrasound and they discover that the baby is actually a female, they choose to have an abortion. The United Nations estimates that there are 1.2 million girls killed by sex-selective abortion every year. They estimate that there's 140 million missing girls due to the cumulative effects of sex-selective abortion and infanticide. Now, if you had to put that in perspective, that's like the entire population of Russia being wiped out, 140 million women, We talk about a woman's right to choose. What about a woman's right to life? What about a woman's right to be born? And then we talk about the humans that are really on the endangered species list. Those with Down syndrome, for an example. The latest statistics is that 67% of pregnancies that are discovered to have a baby with Down syndrome choose to terminate the pregnancy. In Denmark, it's 98%. 98% of women will terminate the pregnancy if they discover they are carrying a baby with Down syndrome. Don't we understand that we are not eliminating a disease? We are eliminating people. Soon we will have access to knowledge about genes that lead to retinitis pigmentosa at later stages in life. Will the mother choose to abort her child because her child will become blind later in life? What about this discovery of this gay gene, which has never been discovered? But what happens if it really did exist? And they discovered that there's a gene that tells you whether you're gay or not. What happens if the mother chooses to abort the child because the child will be born and have same-sex attraction? Then there's this issue of biomedical research where fetuses from or embryos from that are discarded from in vitro fertilization are handed over to scientists for experimentation. And then what about this personhood theory of non-human persons? This was an article that appeared in a prominent medical journal, the Journal of Medical Ethics in 2013. And this is what's being discussed in the ethical world in academia. And the title of the article is After Birth Abortion, Why Should the Baby Live? And it's by prominent ethicists. So in this article, this medical article, it's an academic journal, they have discovered the moral equivalency in personhood status of the fetus and the newborn. And they consider both of them non-person humans. Now, the conclusion that they draw from this is not that we should protect the fetus. No, the conclusion they actually draw is that maybe we should be allowed to kill the newborn. And this is, and I quote, after birth abortion should be permissible in all cases where abortion is, including cases where the newborn is not disabled. This is shocking. I have no words to actually describe this. We need to talk. We need, as a church, to get our head out of the sand. We need to stop living in a world where this is not really an issue. This is an issue. We need to talk about it. Our pastors need to address this from the pulpit. We need to talk about it in our youth group. 73 million babies are killed a year. This is not something we can keep our head underwater about. We need to talk. We need to love both of them. The Bible, God's heart is for those that are weak, those that are in crisis, the widow, the orphan. Jesus identifies with the naked, the prisoner, those that are hungry. We need to love both the mother and the child. We need to pray about this. This is not an issue we can ignore. This is such a profound statement that I found on a pro-life post, and I just want to leave it with you. it says that we have truly failed as a society if the only help we can give to a woman in crisis is to kill her child. I just want to repeat that. We have truly failed as a society if the only help we can give to a woman in crisis is to kill her child. 73 million abortions per year. I'm not going to have time to go through some Bible scriptures, but I just want to give you some resources. These are some resources that I highly recommend. Street Smart is not only on abortion, it's on a lot of general topics, but it does a great job. It has 2 chapters on abortion. Scott Klusendorf's book is very detailed. It's for those who want an in-depth response. Why Pro-Life is a bit more easier to read by Randy Alcorn, and I suggest that. And I just want to leave you with these 2 quotes from Mother Teresa. We must not be surprised when we hear of murders, of killings, of war, of hatred. If a mother can kill her own child, what is left but for us to kill each other? And in a message to the Supreme Court of America, the so-called right to abortion has pitted mothers against their children and women against men. It has shown violence and discord at the heart of the most intimate of human relationship. It has aggravated the derogation of the father's role in an increasingly fatherless society. It has portrayed the greatest of gifts, a child, as a competitor, an intrusion, an inconvenience. It has exposed many women to unjust and selfish demands from their husbands or other sexual partners. Human rights is not a privilege conferred by government. They are every human being's entitlement by virtue of his humanity. The right of life does not depend and must not be declared to be contingent on the pleasure of anyone else, not even a parent or a sovereign. So I want to thank you for your time, and I just want to say this disclosure that no non-human persons were harmed during the production of this PowerPoint presentation. Thank you very much. And I look forward to your questions.
Well, Raphael, thank you so much. A powerful presentation, clearly, to an audience, I have to presume, who's mostly sympathetic, should be entirely sympathetic to the points that you made. A question that I would ask, Raphael, is have you had an opportunity to give this talk or something similar in front of audiences that are not Christians, in front of pro-abortion audiences? And of course, what would be the response?
No, unfortunately not. And the sad truth is I am struggling even to give this talk in churches. And it's not that I haven't reached out or made my intention known to actually give this presentation. And I'm completely aware that this is a sensitive topic. And you notice that some of my colleagues in the pro-life movement will portray pictures or show videos of how an abortion actually occurs. And they have a right to do that. And, coming from apartheid South Africa, I've seen the power of images in changing the dynamic of the debate. But I have chosen not to do that, and to try and address this topic with sensitivity, just knowing the magnitude of this. But you know, I as a doctor, I have privy to patient files, and sometimes I see Christian patients come in, and when I look in their medical history, I see that they've had an abortion. And I think we need to start with our churches first. We have to get the message out there. We have to talk about it. And I haven't actually been given the privilege to talk at a secular environment like this. I have spoken at some churches, but it is a challenge to get this message out there. And that's just the truth. People don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I think the first time I saw the title of your talk, We Need to Talk, I think I was honestly a little bit perplexed because the obvious thought was, well, of course, we need to talk about this. But the implication here is that even us Christians are not talking about it like we should. And pastors are oftentimes not talking about it. So, a very appropriate title. Lots of comments, as you could imagine, in the chat. I'm going to bring up one right up front and pose that as the first question. And it raises an issue. Well, you'll see. So Vlad, who is an apologist from Belgium, writes, and he writes in law school in Spain. They teach us, he went to law school in Spain, and law school in Spain, they teach us that a fetus is not a human. So we are eliminating a bunch of cells. There is no human rights to getting born. Human rights of life is once you are born, not before. So now this is my comment. It seems to me that this argument is based on either or both of the following. One is, as you discuss, the personhood theory. So maybe in Spain they teach us that a fetus is not a person. Maybe that would be the better thing to say. And or this comment or this teaching approach is based on a different worldview. Um, Now, on the worldview side of the house, I teach the two worldview classes in our course, and having a son who is a naturalist, an atheist, who told me that he is nothing more than a bunch of chemicals and molecules, nothing more, nothing less. And when he dies, he's gone and he's okay with that, which is consistent with a worldview of naturalism. If you hold that worldview, then we, including the fetus, are nothing more than a sack of chemicals and molecules. And so it would seem to me that if you hold that worldview, abortion is justified. So if that's the case, the issue then is at the worldview level. I often tell my students, right or wrong, that many of these controversial issues that we as Christians are challenged with are very difficult to argue at the level of the issue because they're based on different worldviews, and that the conflict is ultimately at the worldview level. Ultimately, as whether God exists or doesn't exist, and whether the God of the Bible is reality. So I'm not sure I'm asking a question here, but maybe if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I just want to say that during my presentation, I took quite pains to avoid scripture and the use of theology, because this question is not really, uh, it's in it, I think it can be argued quite convincingly without appeal to theology. It's an appeal to science and to logic. And, you know, I would think that that textbook or that law syllabus that you are talking about is talking about legal persons. That would probably be the term that they would be referred to, and that's a common legal term. So that would be legal persons. And legal persons is the concept of which persons are actually protected by the law. But the fundamental question you have to ask, and that's the answer, the question that you would address towards this concept of personhood theory, is what is the basis of human rights? Human rights, we get this from almost every constitution, self-evident, man created equal. And the only sense of equality that we have is in our humanity, in the cells that we are, and in the way our cells function, in our intrinsic nature. We are all just a bunch of cells. There's no argument about that. Scientifically, medically, we're all just a bunch of cells that are functioning. But we human, and that's the basis of human rights. The number one statement in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights is the right to life. That supersedes everything. And if you say to me that there's other criteria that determine the basis of rights that is not based on our humanity, that is not based on our intrinsic human nature, I will then ask you, says who? Says the apartheid government that bases it on race? Says the religious government that bases on religion? What is your criteria? Self-awareness? Well, then half our population, when they undergo anesthesia or when they're in a coma, don't deserve human rights. You see, the only common denominator that we all have is our humanity and our human nature.
Thank you. All right, we've got a couple of hands waving. So in my upper left screen, the first one I see is Emmy. So Emmy, if you would go ahead and unmute and ask your question. Good to see you, Emmy.
All right, thank you so much, Doug. Good to see you and everyone here. And thank you, Raphael, for this incredible presentation today. I have this one question. I'm from Rwanda in the East Africa. Rwanda, as a country, is a pro-life, but now culturally we've gotten this one challenge on that course of being pro-life, that here in Rwanda, because of the culture, if someone is born of, let's say, if a son impregnates his own mother, or let's say just a father to his own daughter, or just biological sisters and brother, then they are a brother impregnates a sister. So in Rwanda, it's a taboo. It's taboo. So now they have said their nation is pro-life, but if that case happens, it is allowed to, for that fetus to be aborted. Now my question is, given that kind of culture, and also looking into uh, this very presentation of yours, how we Christians, as a church, as the body of Christ here in Rwanda, can deal with this kind of issue, or also considering the culture of the country. Thank you so much.
Well, I just want to say how wonderful it is that Rwanda is pro-life, but that's not a reason for you to just take things lightly. I come from South Africa, and during my lifetime, when I was in medical school, South Africa passed laws from being pro-life to being pro-abortion. So it can happen very quickly. And the influence of the West, the influence of this pro-abortion agenda is very strong. And it is seen as trendy, as being very secular, very pro-West. And it is catching a grip in many countries. Now, coming back to your question, I think that you were addressing this concept of incest. So, number one, I just want to say just how remotely small the percentage of abortions that are due actually to incest in the world today. But I would just show you that technique. I would trot out the toddler. If I have a 2-year-old and I bring this 2-year-old right in front of you, and she is the product of incest. A brother slept with a sister, or an uncle slept with his niece. There's this 2-year-old. What do you want me to do with this 2-year-old? Do you think I should kill this 2-year-old because she reminds people of this incest, or she reminds society of this incest? And that's the fundamental question, is the humanity of the unborn.
Thank you. I see one other hand. Richard, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Hi, everyone. This is Richard from UAE, Dubai. I thank you, Samuel, for this topic that you have brought. I was so much interested in this topic because um, my daughter is a victim of this same topic. Uh, Briefly, if you have some minutes, I can explain, I can give a brief overview of the whole issue. That my daughter was taken by my cousin for during COVID time. And during that COVID, my cousin was locked up in some place, and she requested for my daughter to take care of her kids. And unfortunately, the husband raped my daughter. And in that issue, without my consultation, when the girl got pregnant, my cousin went ahead and they aborted. They aborted. And the issue was that my daughter now doesn't suffer about the raping, but now she's suffering the process where she was taken for abortion. So I really feel this point. I really feel this point, this issue topic, that the process of abortion is affecting most of these girls and these ladies that we have. That at the end of the day, the trauma that they pass through sometimes, especially in our culture, especially in our countries, these undeveloped countries, that they think that abortion is a normal thing to do. But the trauma that my daughter is passing through, it's not about the rape. It's about the abortion she did. That every time, even she goes near to the kids, she clicks on. And that's why I feel like we as Christians, how do we embrace such a thing? How, like myself right now in such a situation, how do I embrace my kid to feel? I don't know how I can bring it, but how can I try to make sure that she can really pass through that trauma? Because it is affecting her as much as it has gone. Some years have gone, but still it is being affected. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm so sorry to hear that, and my heart really goes out to both you and your daughter. And I don't think that this is something that we can take lightly, because rape is such an abomination to the Lord, and it's such an abomination to society. But so is the shedding of innocent blood. And there's one option that we didn't actually speak about that is a viable option in this situation, and that's called adoption. And adoption does provide a way to preserve the life of the innocent child, and also in a way be therapeutic. But I'm just so sorry to hear that. And I think in situations like that, we have to display compassion and the love of Jesus to both um, the mother and the child.
Yes, and I think that's an opportunity to summarize and remind folks of the approach that you suggested that we take, the Christian apologetic approach. as we emphasize in our course, for any issue, is to ask questions, to learn what the real concern is of the person who's dealing with a terrible situation or promoting a non-Christian belief, to be sensitive to them. Just as 1 Peter 3:15 says, we defend ourselves, but we do it, and we defend Christ, but we do it with sensitivity and gentleness. And then, and I guess I knew this, but it became much more clear to me, Raphael, on the use and value of the trotting out the toddler approach. It does make things very clear if you take this approach in many instances. So thank you for sharing that. All right, I do see another hand upper left of my screen, and that is Vlad. All right, Vlad, go ahead and unmute.
I will repeat the question, but I will explain a bit more the situation. Why I am asking this is because it started when I started law school. So the topic was human rights in Spain, and we started with the first right to life. So they try to explain why an embryo is not life or when starts life. So even if I use the premises you gave, for them saying that abortion is killing a human or a person, or it's that premise for them is false, because that embryo is not a baby, is not a person. And if you say that, they will say you are some religious guy or something. So they won't even listen what you are going to say, even you have an expertise and you are a doctor or a lawyer. In my case, they would prefer like another response. But I will ask them why my opinion, in my case, is an opinion, subjective opinion or religious belief, but in your case, is not a subjective preference. And the problem for them is that it's like some cells are not human. So I like here, like being the devil's lawyer, your premises, if one of the premises is false, would lead you to a conclusion that it's false. Even I believe it's for your premises for me are true. But if I explain those premises to my mates, for them wouldn't be true. They wouldn't accept it. And even if I use like the in biology, you explained, you quoted that most of biologists, they say that an embryo is not just a bunch of cells, and it's life, and has his own DNA, different blood, and so on. But because due to the policies we have here, and how and again, my parents are from Romania, and in Romania it's not well seen, the abortion, so it's bad. But Europe is putting a lot of pressure to Romania on this topic. It's like all the governments, they work together to make this happen all over the countries in Europe. And I don't know how can I fight against that policies with better policies.
Well, I thank you for raising that concern, and I appreciate your circumstance that you're in. But I just want to tell you that this question is not a legal question. It's a scientific question, and it's something that we also can glean from logically. It's not a legal. When life begins is a scientific question. All the departments around the world that have consulted on this, and America has actually done quite a bit of work on this in the legal, trying to understand when life begins. They consult scientists, they consult embryologists. The question is a question of science. So that's my first point. It's a scientific question. So whatever you say legally has to be based on scientific fact, or whatever you base legally has to be based on fact. So that's the first point. The second point I want to make is that if you say life does not begin at conception,
Hmm.
but the burden of proof is on you. When does life begin? Now you're faced with some options. You've got to come up with some arbitrary time, either in the womb or out of the womb, when life begins. So when will life begin? So there's only one, when there's a heartbeat, that's still under the time of abortion. And anyway, the embryo does not require the heart at that time for it to be alive and to be growing. And the concept that we have other cells, yes, we do have other cells, but the embryo is not just, it starts off as a cell, but it moves on to being an organism. It's multiple cells, and it's functioning as a whole, as a unit. So it's not just like a tooth or one cell that we can just discard. It's an integrated unit. So you've got to ask, the burden of proof is on them to actually prove when life begins. So for years, before they came up with personhood, the pro-life or the pro-abortion lobby uses concept of viability. So viability is the biological definition of when a fetus can be born and survive outside the mother's womb, right? So
Yeah, but in this case, even a baby of 1 year can survive by himself out without the care of his mother. So
you're missing my point. So we talk in
yeah,
terms of weeks. So 20 weeks is the cutoff in first world countries. So after 20 weeks, a baby can survive outside a mother's womb. So you're trying to say that, oh, then because of that viability, that baby is human and has a life. But the problem is, in certain African countries, viability is only 28 weeks. So the baby can only survive outside the mother's womb at 28 weeks. So that means you're a human in England or in Spain, but you're not a human in Africa or in South Africa. And with advances of science, that viability is being pushed more and more earlier. So you have to come up with an idea of when life begins. Life does not begin at birth. We know that intrinsically. I've been at numerous births. I've seen babies cough inside their mother's womb. You saw the picture of that baby grasping the surgeon's hands at 21 weeks. My third point to you is, because it's legal, it doesn't mean it's right. We know this from history. The Nazis, the Nuremberg defense, what they proposed was this, in Nuremberg, when they were put on trial, they came up with this concept called Befehl ich Befehl in German, an order is an order. We were only following orders. We were only following the orders of our land. And they would have got off scot-free at Nuremberg had somebody not stopped and said, is there no higher law than the law in your country? I grew up under apartheid. Is there no higher law than the law of the apartheid government? So those are the 3 points that I would leave with you.
thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I know we're running over, but we have one last question. I want to honor that. Norman, if you'd go ahead and unmute. Norman's made a number of comments in the chat, so I
Yes,
should follow up. So
thanks a lot, Rafa, for these very provocative and fundamental topic that you have presented. I have a very simple but kind of interesting thoughts in my mind. I was watching just days ago a video of this scientist. I think he's from America. He's a geneticist, and he was talking about vaccines whereby we have human embryo material. And it seems like even some of the COVID vaccines had human embryonic material or from the fetus or something like that. So I wanted to hear your thoughts about such uses of human fetus. How, as a Christian, how are we to kind of handle such type of medical whatever advancements? So yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on that, please.
Okay, we're getting outside the scope of the talk. So, Raphael, I don't
It's fine. It's a very valid question, and I appreciate the question because I was asked this numerous times during COVID, and actually, I wish my wife would have asked this question. She's a clinical virologist and has a PhD in virology. But the question is about the use of cell lines to grow viruses. And unfortunately, the cell line that was used to grow the viruses that was used to use this vaccine actually does come from an aborted fetus, one aborted fetus that was like 30 years ago or something. So they grew this aborted fetus's cells, and then they injected virus into that, and then they used that for testing. Now, why they chose an aborted fetus, I have no idea. And I think that's so ridiculous because they should have chosen maybe another fetus that was spontaneously miscarried. But it is what it is, and that is the truth. They did choose an aborted fetus, and this fetus was 30. I'm not accurate with the exact age, but I think it was like 30 years ago. So there's one fetus, and they grew the cells from this fetus. Whether now some companies are still using this fetal lines. Now it's not the fetus, it's the cells that was derived from this fetus that they are growing. Cells can grow in a laboratory if you provide like specific it's the cells are not like a human being, they just cells. So I was pretty upset that they used the aborted fetus lines, and some pro-life organizations take concern regarding this, and I think they have a right point. Whether or not I choose to take the vaccine, I'll leave it up to your own discretion and after prayer and consideration. I did take the COVID vaccine, despite that, because it was a risk benefit and it was saving my life at a time when the virus was particularly prevalent. But I'll leave it up to you, your discretion. Certainly, I feel strongly that these companies should stop using that cell line and should use another miscarried fetus cell line or something like that. But that brings up another topic on biomedical research, which is actually very separate from what you're talking about. And that's just a can of worms. And you'd really, for us to go there, it's actually pretty shocking what mad scientists are actually doing. And they really are mad scientists. At least in the United States, they have some regulation, but in places like China or places around the world, there's no regulation on they are using living embryos to experiment on. There may be a time in the future where they can genetically alter these embryos and grow them up so that we can even harvest organs from them.
Hmm.
That's the end goal of some of this experimentation. I'm not an expert on this. I try and stick very close to the root issue: abortion on demand, abortion due to simple things like this baby is going to inconvenience me. I cannot complete my studies. I cannot bear the shame of being pregnant. That's the reason for 99% of abortions.
All right, with that, thank you so much, Raphael. Um, I think we could probably go on for another hour with the questions and but your responses have been wonderful as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Ben for closing comments and a closing prayer. So my partner, Ben, over to you.
Yeah. So, Raphael, wow, that was really great. Um, the power of your presentation, the rationality of it is so crystal clear that it makes me wonder, as as our friend Vlad was mentioning in his country, how people can dispute this approach. So, thank you so much for that, and we're really grateful. And thank you also for bringing up the other ethical challenges that we need to grapple with. And I think it just all circles back to why, as Christians, it's important for us to always, prepare ourselves with good answers to these challenges. And I want to say also that I really appreciate that your approach didn't necessarily hinge on bringing in scripture or building it from the basis of our religious beliefs, even though those are true. I think it's a good tactic, and especially in non-believing communities to not go down that approach and to rely strictly on your rational and scientific approach. So thank you for that. So all of you out there in the audience, thank you guys for hanging in there. We again bumped up to quite a few people attending, so clearly this was an area of interest. Raphael, before I say closing prayer, how would people connect with your work? Can you give us some ideas?
Well, if they would like this talk at a church or at any setting, just feel free to contact me via Apologetics Canada. You can just click on a speaker request and on my profile at Apologetics Canada, and yeah, or even via you guys if you just want to drop me an email, I'll
Yeah.
be.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for your generosity there. And yes, I commend everybody to go check out Apologetics Canada. You'll find many speakers, Raphael included, and feel free to connect with him through them or through us. So with that, let me just close in prayer. Thanking you, Lord Jesus, for all that is good in our lives. You are the way, the truth, and the life, and we are so grateful that you have revealed yourself through what you've made, through who you are coming and dwelling amongst us, for your love shown in your sacrifice on our behalf, and in your promises, Lord, for eternal life with you. Lord, help us all collectively as your children in your church, citizens of your kingdom, to go and proclaim your good news, Lord, and speak against just the terrible evils that are manifest in our cultures, that we see in abortion, which takes the lives of innocent children, innocent human beings, which is murder, and you've commanded us not to do that. And so, Lord, may we be able to articulate what we've learned today to others and make an impact in our culture, in our nations, in our governments, through our legal systems, showing them all that there is a higher authority to which we all must answer to. So, Lord, thank you so much for Raphael. Thank you for Apologetics Canada and the impact it's having. And Lord, thank you for the privilege that we have of being a little part of just raising awareness of apologetics to our brothers and sisters around the world. So we love you, Lord, and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank
All
you.
right. Well, thank you guys all. And just as a reminder, we post these recordings on our website. So so if you want to share it in the future, go ahead and go to our website and check it out. All right.
And for those of you that are students in our course, next week, same time, we'll begin our science and faith 2 classes. So see you then.
All right. Thanks again, Raphael. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye bye. Thank you.